Self actualization lies at the top of this pyramid that I've talked about in several of my past videos in Maslow's law of hierarchy. Now, this is actually a very common or very popular theory or idea in socioeconomics, in anthropology, which talks about what essentially humans are after, or what is the needs of the humans. And this idea, essentially, self actualization, what it means is, regardless of whatever means one has accessible, the ultimate thing that everyone wants to do, or and an individual in the modern society or in the postmodern society wants to do, is to fulfill whatever they have defined their purpose to be on the face of this earth. Now, it could mean quite a lot of things. They might want to accumulate a lot of wealth and be free from any kind of, jobs or, pressure from anybody or anyone else. It could be, I want to have a huge mansion. It could be, I want to have this cars. I want to have 10 cars. It could be, I want to have 10 wives, 10 children, anything. And the means that they actually have to sort of accumulate to get to that could mean they have to make a lot of money. It could mean they have to get a lot of power, or combinations of these. Okay. Now, if that is your purpose, if you have identified your purpose to mean any of these in this kind of category, then you will naturally pursue those means. Now, why is this video important? Because almost all other religions and ways of life, except for Islam, and anything and everything in the postmodern society, centers around this philosophy or this idea. That is, whatever I want myself to be, whatever I want to have. And I don't want to emphasize on just I, because when I said self, it could mean any level of self. It could mean myself, herself, himself, ourselves, any self that is defining the purpose, or your dad tells you, your brother tells you, your mother tells you, your family tells you, or tradition tells you, whatever self. And by self, that is referring to some created being. If that created being has defined that purpose, and you take that to be your purpose, then you have essentially accepted self-actualization. Self-actualization is so foundational to our marketplace, to many of the religions of the world. And if you ask many Muslims too, unfortunately today, and they ask, what role does Islam have in your life? And they would say, it has this role of bringing me discipline. It has this role of giving me, making me a good person. And what they're implying here is, I want to get here, just like every one of you guys. And Islam, I think, is the best strategy to get to that place. Before I go ahead and explain what takes the place of self actualization and what that means, I want to explain why self actualization is not a goal that is worthy of being pursued, or a purpose that is worthy of being pursued. Essentially, first things first, it is limited, it is shallow, in the sense that whatever pursuit you want to take up that centers around self actualization, or centers around the pleasure of some human being or anything, right? You want to actualize yourself, or any kind of self, okay? So, idea of any self thing, if you're going to pursue that, eventually that thing is going to come to an end. So if you dream of having, a huge mansion, that mansion, essentially carries the properties of this world, because it's going to be built in some planet, and every planet in this whole system here eventually decays and dies. And if you have any basic knowledge about how nature works or how science works, you'd know that. Okay. Number two, even to whatever extent or however long it lasts, it actually carries, it doesn't exactly follow the way you desire. So essentially, you want the world to work in a certain way, but you have to go through a lot of difficulty. And some of you guys might say, it's all worth it. But, even with all of those sacrifices, eventually comes a part of your life comes with what you wanted, and it comes with a huge baggage of a lot of problems. Think about the richest billionaires. they're not the happiest people in this planet. You can find several trillionaires and billionaires who have a lot of money, but they're so miserable on the inside. That's just the natural, sort of way this world is designed. You cannot really say that, okay, this person did XYZ wrong. You have to understand that even if you did everything right according to the, sort of this materialistic, secular nature of this world, you did everything by the book, you'd still actually get to a place where everything is miserable. And this is a very strange thing, I know, to hear and to say, because most of the, even the religious people, what they say is, if you pray 5 times a day, all your problems will be gone. No, not really. The thing is, it gives you perspective, okay? If you pray 5 times a day, it doesn't get rid of all your problems. You have a very different purpose for praying. You remind yourself of the purpose. You remind yourself of what you're here for. What is your place and purpose in this world? And that should reinforce that identity inside. Okay? So rather than us thinking of Allah as the Santa Claus, regardless of whatever I do, if I give this if I give this thing, then he will give me that. He doesn't need anything. Okay, it's a very difficult or an impossible thing for us to like fully understand what that means, because in our world everybody wants something. Okay, because every one of us are weak, and a boss wants our work and we want their money, and it goes like that. But Allah doesn't need anything from us. Like, he doesn't literally need anything. He's designed this creation, and he's left us this choice to be grateful or to be ungrateful. And the way we do that is through whatever he has provided us. So it's not going, all of us are not going to look the same and have the same. Ultimately, we are performing to that one creator. So what exactly takes the place of self-actualization within Islam? And that, the divine pleasure. Self-actualization is not an abstract idea that came out of nowhere from someone's head. Okay, self-actualization was actually a natural consequence of a lot of things that were actually happening in history, right? So we're going to talk about that history in one of the upcoming videos, where I'm going to be talking and explaining postmodernism. Now, it's a movement, and when you say movement, it's not only referring to one person. There's a lot of people who came and contributed towards one specific end. Okay, that's why it's called a movement. Now, postmodernism essentially gave birth to this idea of self-actualization. So it was not created in a vacuum. The reason I'm saying this is because it was not, postmodernism or self-actualization that was a natural way of life. It was divine pleasure, like seeking divine pleasure, that was actually the original world order. God was the king of this, whole creation. And now, in the world that we're living in, we have artificially, psychologically and philosophically, flipped the whole system, and we have made ourselves the king and gods. And that's what Friedrich Nietzsche tried to explain, which a lot of people like don't understand what he was trying to say when he said God is dead and we have killed him. The reason he said that was not because they literally, the modern society literally killed him. Essentially, what he was trying to explain was that there's so much of things that we have to now define without divine wisdom. If you're going to define our purpose and the whole system of existence without divine guidance, and he said we're going to get rid of any kind of divine wisdom. We're going to define what's the purpose and how things have to be defined all by ourselves. This was a philosopher. If you can, I would encourage you to go read and watch more about this person. It would give you more context about how self-actualization came to be. Now, because divine pleasure was the ultimate goal at the time, any kind of product, service, or religion at that time, when Islam was the dominant sort of way of life, what happened naturally was everybody was working towards that goal as well. So what people wanted to buy, or what people wanted to do, centered around the Islamic dominance. When God was the dominant in people's psychology, what actually happened was people worked towards that goal. The sellers, the buyers, the politics, the socio-economic, everything, okay, revolved around, the Islamic way of life, which was realizing divine pleasure. So when people made a lot of money, it was not understood to be all about themselves. It was looked down upon to actually lie, or essentially to be egotistical. Those attributes existed back then too. But the thing is, now, to be more un-Islamic is essentially celebrated and seen to be a cool thing. That's because now we have made self-actualization the whole purpose of existence. Now, I just wanted to explain in this video was the philosophy behind all of our designs. This video is quite important for you to understand. If you've not really grasped, how deep this goes, I'm going to give you a higher level sort of examples in many of my upcoming videos. And then by watching those videos and you connecting back to this video, you should understand how deep this idea of self-actualization is, embedded into our society, and how we have made ourselves to be God, even though nominally and verbally we say Allahu Akbar, we lie every single day, and we say Allahu Akbar, we don't actually live according to this. Try to honestly ask yourselves, at every aspect of your life, did you pick up your career because you wanted to earn divine pleasure? And if yes, on what basis did you, define that to be divine pleasure? If no, then you certainly would have certain aspects. I want to pray because I want to earn divine pleasure. Remember, we're Muslims for life. We're going to be given our book of deeds for our entire lives. There's no pause, in our, sort of script. Our script of life is being written right now. So you cannot say, "Oh, angels, please stop writing this part of my life. I want to hit the pause button." No. The thing is, you are God's slave, 24/7, 365 days, or 366 days if it's a leap year, every single moment of your life. And if you're not going to work towards that, although we're going to falter at times, we have taken up false gods. And the minute we have taken up false gods, remember, we're going to need to fulfill the flaws or the weaknesses of that god with another god, and the weaknesses of that god with this god or another god. And so it's either one god or it's going to be a bazillion bit different gods. Okay? And all of those gods are just basically not existent. They're just things that you made up in yourself, right? And with that said, I want to continue this notion in my upcoming videos, give you more context about how this idea came about, and I will give you more examples as to how this idea that is so foundational to our society is manifested and sort of evident in our products, services, and in many other religions in my upcoming videos. So be sure to stay subscribed, like this video, because it helps the YouTube algorithm and everything. With that said, hope to see you in my upcoming videos. Assalamu alaikum.